Well, hello, we're in Deuteronomy chapter 24, and we did the first 5 verses last time. I think we'll try and get all of it done, the rest of it done in this one. So, reading from the NIV, from verse 6 onwards. Do not take a pair of millstones, not even the upper one, as security for a debt, because that would be taking a person's livelihood as security. If someone is caught kidnapping a fellow Israelite and treating or selling them as a slave, kidnapper must die. You must purge the evil from among you. In cases of defiling skin diseases, be very careful to do exactly as the Levitical priests instruct you. You must follow carefully what I have commanded them. Remember what the Lord your God did to Miriam along the way after you came out of Egypt. When you make a loan of any kind to your neighbour, do not go into their house to get what is offered to you as a pledge. Stay outside and let the neighbour to whom you are making the loan bring the pledge out. If the neighbour is poor, do not go to sleep with their pledge in your possession. Return their cloak by sunset so that your neighbour may sleep in it. Then they will thank you, and it will be guarded as a righteous act in the sight of the Lord your God. Do not take advantage of a hired worker who is poor and needy, whether that worker is a fellow Israelite or a foreigner residing in one of your towns. Pay them their wages each day before sunset, because they are poor and are counting on it. Otherwise they may cry to the Lord against you, and you will be guilty of sin. Parents are not to be put to death for their children, nor children put to death for their parents. Each will die for their own sin. Do not deprive the foreigner or the fatherless of justice, or take the cloak of the widow as a pledge. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you from there. That is why I command you to do this. When you are harvesting in your field and overlook a sheaf, do not go back to get it. Leave it for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat the olives from trees, do not go over the branches a second time. Leave what remains for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow. When you harvest the grapes in your vineyard, do not go over the vines again. Leave what remains for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow. Remember, you were slaves in Egypt. That is why I command you to do this. So there's it's definitely an easier passage than some of the ones we encounter. There's a number of general principles. One is the valuing of life, and the other one is respect for the person, in particular for poor people. So, first of all, it says, do not take a pair of millstones as security for debt. It accepts that people will get into debt. Doesn't matter what economic system you have, doesn't matter how well a country is doing economically. Some people will get into debt. It is not about taking one of the millstones. They needed the millstones to grind grain, to make bread, to get the stuff for the bread, for their livelihood. And then it says about going to collect a loan. It says, don't go into their house, the person. Don't be a bailiff, if you like, but let them bring out the pledge themselves. It's treating the person with dignity. And then says, do not keep the pledge overnight. They might need it either for their livelihood or to keep warm. So notice there's 2 things here. One, it doesn't just say write off the debt. We've got stuff about the year of the Jubilee elsewhere. But leave that aside for the moment. It doesn't pretend people don't get into debt. It doesn't pretend it doesn't matter. People were treated with dignity in 2 ways. One, what they do with their life matters. But then also, if you're a person and you seem to have power, i.e. you're doing fine, and they're not, you help them, you do not demean them in any way. The bit about skin disease, it's the bit about Miriam is that she was rebelling against Moses at one point along with Aaron, and was struck with leprosy by God as a result. And skin diseases could, not always, but could sometimes be a result of sin. And that's why they're told here to obey properly, carefully what the priests instruct you to do. And the priests, meanwhile, are meant to do what God has told them to do. And what else have we got to say? Do not take advantage of a hired worker who is poor and needy, whether that worker is a fellow Israelite or a foreigner. And there's a couple of other instances later on in the chapter. It talks about looking for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow. There are some laws here and there which seem to treat Israelites preferentially to foreigners. Here, and all the ones in here, that's not the case. The foreigner is treated just like an Israelite. And it talks about pay their wages each day before sunset. Now, the way society worked in those days, you got paid, if you were a hired labourer, you got paid by the day. That's how things worked. And what you had to do was to make sure people weren't put into poverty. You don't be a bad boss. And just as an aside, it's one against taking it over literally. Most of us these days, we're paid monthly. This does not mean it is a sin to pay someone monthly. It depends how the economic system is structured. Then note also here it says, if you don't do this, they may cry to the Lord against you, and you will be guilty of sin. And then earlier bit talked about giving some of their cloak back before sunset. It says, they will thank you, and it will be regarded as a righteous act in the sight of the Lord your God. If you're powerful, or relatively powerful, you may think, they don't matter, the poor don't matter. This here and elsewhere in the Bible, see, that's not the case at all. God listens to the cry of the poor. So if they bless you because you've been kind and treated them well, God will hear that. But if you've treated them badly, and they cry out against us, God will hear that as well, and we could be in big trouble. And then it says, parents are not to be put to death for children, no children for their parents. We take responsibility. Now, what other people do has an effect on our lives, but ultimately we take responsibility for ourselves. And the last part, talk about harvesting, says, don't go over the field beat the olives a second time. If you leave bits at the side in the field, just leave them. Why was that for? Because so that the poor, whether widows, fatherless, foreigners, they could get the gleanings, the sort of extras, if you like, and it would help them. So there is, don't be super efficient. Now, we should try and do things well and not waste stuff. We say, don't try to be over efficient. And particularly here, where just leaving a few things there for the poor to take. It might help them a bit. It says, remember you were slaves in Egypt. And to put this more generally, the biggest advantage of the gospel is that Jesus Christ has paid the price for our sins. When we look at someone else, we might, they're a sinner. He might sometimes be appalled at the way they live or whatever. We, too, sinners. In fact, of course, we still do sin. None of us are perfect. But we were rescued from sin. And that should influence how we affect our attitude and actions towards other people. So I've been going on quite a bit with this one, so let's stop there.